My in-laws announced at Thanksgiving dinner, in front of 30 people, that I would be signing over my house to fund my brother-in-law's fresh start. They didn't know I had a notarized agreement in my fireproof safe that changed everything. By the next morning, I had already made 3 calls that ended their plan before it ever began. But let me start from the beginning, because if I don't, none of this makes sense. We're always curious, where in the world are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments, I'd love to know. I was 31 years old, a licensed CPA working for a mid-size accounting firm in Columbus, Ohio, when my husband passed away. His name was Trevor. We had been married 4 years. He had a genetic heart condition that none of us knew about until the morning he didn't wake up. He was 34. There is no way to describe that kind of loss cleanly, so I won't try. What I will say is that the months after his death were the most disorienting of my life, and the people I expected to hold me up were the ones who eventually used my grief as leverage. The house was mine before I ever met Trevor. I bought it at 27 with my own savings, a down payment I had been building since my first job out of college. It was a 3-bedroom Craftsman in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of house with a porch you actually sit on. I remember signing the closing documents and thinking, this is mine. Nobody can take this from me. I held that thought like a stone in my palm for years. It turned out I was going to need it. Trevor's family, his parents, his younger brother, and his brother's girlfriend, lived about 40 minutes south of us. His father, who I'll call my father-in-law, had the kind of personality that fills a room and then slowly suffocates it. He was charming at first, warm, even. He called me the smart one at holidays, which I understood later was not a compliment so much as a category. Trevor's younger brother, who I'll call my brother-in-law, was 26 and had been in and out of construction jobs for 3 years. His girlfriend, who I'll call his girlfriend, because that's all she ever was and all she will ever be to me, had expensive taste and a talent for making other people feel like they owed her something. After Trevor died, his family came to stay with me for 2 weeks. I let them. I needed bodies in the house. I needed the noise. I made a mistake that a lot of grieving people make, which is that I confused presence with support. They were there, yes, but my mother-in-law reorganized my kitchen on day 3 without asking. My father-in-law told me I should think about what Trevor would have wanted for the house. I didn't ask what he meant. I should have. The 2 weeks became a month. The month became 3. My brother-in-law's girlfriend started referring to the guest room as our room. My mother-in-law began hosting her book club at my kitchen table. I was still in the fog of early grief, still wearing Trevor's sweatshirt to sleep, still forgetting to eat real meals, and I did not have the bandwidth to process what was happening. So I let it continue. That was my fault, and I own it. What I did not let slide, even then, was the paperwork. 3 months after Trevor passed, I sat down with my own attorney, not the family's, mine, and made sure every document related to the house was airtight. The deed was in my name alone. Trevor was never on it. We had talked about adding him and decided to wait. That delay, which felt like a small administrative thing at the time, turned out to be the thing that saved me. My attorney and I also drafted a formal residential guest agreement for my in-laws, which stated clearly that they were guests, not tenants, with no claim to the property and no right to sublease or modify the space. I told them it was standard legal housekeeping, something my firm required, given that I was a property owner hosting extended family. My father-in-law signed it without reading it. That was the first time. By the following November, 14 months after Trevor's death, I had found my footing again. I was back at work full-time. I had started therapy. I had repainted the bedroom, which sounds small but was enormous. I was not okay, but I was functional in the way that grief eventually allows you to be functional. Not healed, just load-bearing again. Thanksgiving that year was at my house. That was my first mistake, agreeing to host. My mother-in-law offered to handle the cooking, which I accepted because I was still learning that her offers were never just offers. They were advance claims on territory. 22 people showed up. Trevor's aunts, cousins, I had met twice, neighbors of my in-laws who I had never met at all. My house, which I loved because it was quiet and mine, was overrun by 9 in the morning. I spent most of the day in the kitchen pretending to be useful, while actually just trying to stay out of the way. I had a glass of wine. I had a second. By the time we all sat down to eat, I was tired in the way you get tired when you've been performing okayness for hours in a house that used to feel like yours. My father-in-law stood up after the blessing. He did this every year, Trevor had told me, stood up and made some kind of speech. I braced for a toast to Trevor's memory, which I could have handled. I had been handling things. He thanked everyone for coming. He talked about family, about legacy, about how Trevor would have wanted the people he loved to stick together. I felt the familiar hollow ache and kept my eyes on my plate. And then he pivoted. As most of you know, he said, his voice shifting into a register I recognized, the one he used when he wanted something. Our younger son has been working hard to get his feet under him. He's been offered a position out in Denver, a real opportunity, but he needs a solid start. A home base. I looked up. We've been thinking about this a lot as a family, he continued, and we've decided that the right thing to do, what Trevor would have wanted, is for us to help make that happen. Since this house belongs to our family now, and since it's much more space than one person needs, we're planning to sell it and split the equity so that all of us can move forward. The table went quiet. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I held my wine glass, and I looked at my father-in-law, and I waited for him to say he was joking. He was not joking. He was looking at me with the particular expression of someone who has already decided the outcome and is only now informing you of it. My brother-in-law's girlfriend started nodding before he finished the sentence. She reached over and squeezed my brother-in-law's hand. "We are so grateful," she said, loud enough for the room. "It means everything that family shows up like this." A cousin murmured something approving. An aunt said, "That's what Trevor would have wanted." I heard the phrase like an alarm going off behind glass. I set my wine glass down very carefully. "That's an interesting thought," I said. My voice came out steady, which surprised me. "We can talk about it later." My mother-in-law looked relieved. My father-in-law looked satisfied. My brother-in-law's girlfriend looked at me the way you look at something that has finally agreed to be useful. I excused myself 10 minutes later, said I needed air. I stood on my own porch in the November cold and looked at the street I had lived on for 4 years and thought with absolute clarity they believe this house is theirs. They have believed it for 14 months, and I have let them believe it because I was too tired and too sad to fight. I was not too tired anymore. I went back inside, helped clear the dishes, said my good nights with a smile, and by 10 o'clock I had the house to myself. I sat at my kitchen table, my table with a legal pad, and I wrote down everything I knew. I owned the house. My name alone was on the deed, recorded with Franklin County. Trevor had never been added, his estate had no claim to it. The guest agreement my in-laws had signed explicitly stated they held no ownership interest. I was a CPA, not a real estate attorney, but I knew enough to know that what my father-in-law had announced at that dinner table was not a plan. It was a fantasy built on the assumption that I would not push back. He did not know me as well as he thought. I called my attorney. Her name is not important, but she is very good. The next morning at 8, I laid out the situation. She asked 2 questions, confirmed what I already suspected, and told me she'd have a formal notice drafted by end of day. I told her to make it thorough. She said she always did. By noon, I had done 3 other things. I called my bank and added a verbal alert to my account. Any inquiries about the property at my address were to be flagged and reported to me immediately. My father-in-law had a habit of moving fast when he thought momentum was on his side. I had worked with enough clients to know that people who announce things publicly tend to start executing the plan the next business day. I was right to be cautious. At 2:15, I got a call from the bank's lending department. Someone had called that morning, before I had even spoken to my attorney, inquiring about the process for initiating a probate property sale. They had given my address. They had implied the property was part of a deceased person's estate. It was not. Trevor had no ownership stake. There was no probate claim, but my father-in-law had apparently decided that widows don't read the fine print. "Please note the inquiry and decline to provide further information," I told the bank. "The property is not part of any estate. I am the sole owner and I am very much alive." There was a pause on the line. Noted, Miss. I gave her my name. We'll flag it. The third call was to my brother-in-law's girlfriend's Instagram account, which I pulled up on my laptop not to post anything but to read. She had already posted. It had been up since 11 that morning. A photo of the Thanksgiving table, soft light, warm tones, the kind of photo that makes everything look like a blessing. The caption read, "So grateful for family that shows up. New chapter loading. Denver, here we come. Crash. Crash." Had tagged my house and the location. I took a screenshot. Then I took screenshots of every comment. Her friends were congratulating her. Someone asked where they were going to live. She replied, "Working out the details, but we're so excited. Family always finds a way." I saved everything to a folder labeled with the date and the words "Do not delete." That evening, my mother-in-law called. She used her warm voice, the one she reserved for situations where she needed me cooperative. "I know yesterday was a lot," she said. "But your father-in-law and I have been thinking about this for a long time. We know it's a big change." "But sweetie, it's just so much house for one person. And Trevor always wanted his brother to succeed." "I know he did," I said. "So you understand." "I understand what you're asking," I said. "That's not the same thing as agreeing to it." There was a silence. "We're not asking exactly," she said, her voice tightening just slightly at the edges. "Your father-in-law already spoke to a realtor. She's coming by on Tuesday to do an assessment." I let that sit for a moment. "Cancel it," I said. "Amy." She stopped herself. She had almost used my name warmly. "The house is part of our family. Trevor was our son." "Trevor was my husband," I said, "and the house is in my name. Only my name. It has been since I bought it 4 years before I met Trevor. I have the deed, I have the purchase records, and I have a guest agreement that you and your husband signed 11 months ago confirming you have no ownership interest in this property. Do not send a realtor to my house." The silence this time was longer. "I'll let your father-in-law know what you said," she said finally, and hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand and felt something I hadn't felt in 14 months. Not anger, exactly. Clarity. The kind that arrives when you realize the grief you've been managing was being used as a distraction. The realtor showed up anyway on Tuesday. She rang the doorbell at 10 in the morning. I answered the door with a copy of the deed in my hand. "Hi," I said pleasantly. "Can I help you?" She introduced herself, mentioned my in-laws' names, said she understood we were discussing a potential listing. "I'm not discussing a listing," I said. "This property is not for sale. The people who contacted you do not own it and do not have the authority to request an assessment. I'd encourage you to confirm ownership through the county recorder's office before taking on any clients who claim an interest in a property." I handed her my business card. "If you have questions, my attorney's number is on the back." She left without coming inside. That afternoon, my father-in-law called. He did not use the warm voice. He skipped straight to the version of himself that had probably worked on a lot of people over the years. Low, certain. The kind of tone that implies consequences without stating them. "You embarrassed your mother-in-law," he said. "I answered my own front door," I said. "We are trying to do right by this family. By selling a house you don't own? That house is Trevor's legacy." "Trevor's legacy," I said, "is that he loved his family and worked hard and died too young. His name was not on my deed. I checked. I've checked more than once." I paused. "I also found out about the call you made to my bank the morning after Thanksgiving." Silence. "Inquiring about probate proceedings on a property that is not part of any estate," I continued. "That is misrepresentation to a financial institution. I want to be very clear with you about what that means legally, because I spend a lot of my professional life explaining it to clients. You're threatening me." "I'm informing you," I said. "There's a difference. I learned it from working with people who tried to take things that weren't theirs." He hung up. 2 days later, my mother-in-law posted on Facebook. I was not tagged, but a cousin texted me a screenshot within the hour. The post was long, the kind of long that takes planning. It talked about grief, about a daughter-in-law who had closed her heart, about a family that only wanted to honor their son's memory and had been turned away. It did not mention the deed. It did not mention the bank call. It did not mention the realtor or the guest agreement or the 14 months during which I had housed 4 adults without charging rent. The comments were sympathetic. So sorry. Grief does strange things. You raised such a good man. Someone who had been at Thanksgiving wrote, "She seemed so calm at dinner. I had no idea she felt this way." My brother-in-law's girlfriend wrote, "Some people choose money over family." That says everything. It got 43 likes. I read all of it. I did not respond to any of it. I forwarded the screenshots to my attorney with a note that said, "Adding to the file." The formal notice arrived at my in-laws' rental address on a Thursday. It was a cease and desist, drafted on my attorney's letterhead, citing the guest agreement they had signed, the recorded deed, and the specific incidents, the realtor visit, the bank inquiry, the public statements, as evidence of a pattern of harassment and misrepresentation. It requested written acknowledgement within 10 days that they would make no further attempts to claim, sell, or encumber the property, and that they would remove all personal items from the guest room by the first of the following month. It also noted that any future misrepresentation to financial institutions regarding the property would be reported to the appropriate authorities. My father-in-law called my attorney instead of me. She told me the conversation lasted 4 minutes. He wanted to know if I was serious. She told him the notice was a legal document and that serious was, in fact, the operative word. He said his son had built a life in that house. She pointed out that his son had never been on the title. He said the family had an understanding. She said understandings that aren't in writing don't hold up in court. He asked what I wanted. She said I wanted acknowledgement and compliance. He said he needed to talk to his wife. The acknowledgement came back signed 8 days later. No letter, no additional communication. Just the signature page faxed to my attorney's office. My brother-in-law's girlfriend did not go quietly on social media, but she went. The posts tapered off over 2 weeks, shifting from grief-coded outrage to Denver content. Coffee shops, apartment hunting, captions about new beginnings and fresh starts. The Denver job, it turned out, was real. My brother-in-law took it. I was glad. I genuinely hoped he would do well there. He was not the problem. He had just never learned to say no to the people who were. The guest room was cleared out by the end of the month. My mother-in-law left a candle on the dresser. I don't know if it was an accident or a statement. I threw it away either way. For a while, I thought that would be the end of it. The cease and desist had worked. The social media noise had faded. I had changed the garage door code and the alarm pin, and the house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in over a year. But families like mine, families organized around the assumption that one person exists to absorb the costs of everyone else's choices, don't reorganize easily. They wait. The next move came through my mother-in-law's sister, a woman I will call my aunt-in-law, who I had always liked and who, it turned out, had been recruited. She texted me in January asking if we could have lunch. "Just the 2 of us," she said. She missed me. She wanted to check in. I went, because I did like her, and because I was curious. We met at a diner near her office. We ordered coffee. We talked about the holidays, about the cold winter, about her grandkids, and then, about 20 minutes in, she set her mug down and said, "Amy, I hope you know I love you. And I think you need to hear this from someone who's on your side." I put my fork down. "Your in-laws are not doing well," she said. "The situation with the house really hit them hard. They feel like they lost Trevor and then lost you too. And I know you have every legal right to do what you did. I know that. But I wonder if there's a version of this where you extend some grace. Even just a conversation. Let them feel heard." She reached across the table and touched my hand. She had kind eyes. She meant it. I took a breath. "I want to show you something," I said. I opened my phone. I pulled up the bank inquiry record. I showed her the timestamp, 6:47 in the morning, the day after Thanksgiving, before I had even called my attorney, before my coffee was finished. "Your brother-in-law called the bank at 6:47 in the morning to ask how to initiate a probate sale on a house that was never part of any estate," I said. "While I was still asleep. While I was still technically in the same month as a holiday where I was supposed to be surrounded by family, I showed her the social media post. The caption. The 43 likes on the comment about people who choose money over family. I showed her the realtor visit log my attorney had documented, time-stamped, with the realtor's business card attached to the file. My aunt-in-law was quiet for a long time. I didn't know about the bank, she finally said. Most people don't, I said, because that part wasn't posted online. She stirred her coffee. She looked tired. What do you want, Amy? Long term, what do you actually want? I thought about it honestly, which I had been doing for 2 months by then. I want to grieve my husband without having to defend my property at the same time, I said. I want to be able to miss him without being managed. I'm willing to have a relationship with his family. A real one, where I'm a person and not a resource. But I'm not willing to go back to pretending the last 14 months didn't happen. She nodded slowly. She didn't argue. She picked up her coffee and said, That's fair. That's really fair. And then, quietly, I'll talk to them. I don't know exactly what she said, but the calls from my in-laws stopped. The social media posts about grief and family and chosen priorities went quiet. My mother-in-law sent me a card in February. Just a card, a watercolor bird on the front, a few lines inside that said she was sorry for the pain of the last few months and that she hoped we could find a way forward. It was not a full apology. It did not address the bank call or the realtor or the Facebook post, but it was the first communication from her in 3 months that didn't feel like a move on a board. I kept the card. I'm not sure why. Maybe because Trevor loved her, and that still means something to me even now. Maybe because I understand that people who have never been held accountable for the way they treat the people they love don't always know how to apologize fully on the first try. I wrote back a short note. I said I appreciated hearing from her. I said I was open to finding a way forward, but that it would have to be built on honesty. I said I would not be returning to the arrangement we'd had before, but I wasn't closing a door. She didn't respond right away. That was okay. In March, I listed the house. I had thought about it for a long time. Whether staying felt like winning, or whether it just felt like staying inside a place that had accumulated too many hard memories. The porch was still beautiful. The hardwood floors were still solid, but every room held something I was working to move past, and I had come to understand that geography can be a form of courage too. The house sold in 11 days, above asking price. The equity cleared in my account on a Tuesday morning, and I sat at my kitchen table, the table I was about to wrap in moving blankets, and looked at that number for a long moment. I had bought that house at 27 with my savings. I had protected it at 31 with my knowledge. I was 32 now, and it had become the foundation of something completely new. I found an apartment on the north side of the city, a 1-bedroom on the 4th floor with big windows and no history. I signed the lease alone. I moved in on a Saturday with the help of 2 friends and a rented van. I made my bed that night in a room that smelled like fresh paint and possibility, and I slept for 9 hours straight, which was more than I had managed on any single night in the past 18 months. My brother-in-law texted me the week I moved. He'd seen the listing go up, he said. He hoped I was okay. He said he was sorry, not for any specific thing, which told me he either didn't know the specifics or wasn't ready to go there yet, but sorry in the general, fumbling way of someone who knows the atmosphere changed and understands it was partly because of him. I wrote back. I said I was genuinely doing well. I said I hoped Denver was good to him. I meant both things. My mother-in-law and I have had 2 phone calls since then, short ones. Careful. We talk about the weather, about Trevor's cousins, about nothing that costs us anything. It is not the relationship I would have chosen, but it is an honest one, which is more than I had for a long time without realizing it. What I know now, that I didn't know when I was standing on that porch in November in the cold, is that the house was never really what they were after. Houses are just the legible version of something harder to name, the assumption that someone's grief makes them available, that love is a form of debt, that being the capable one in a family means your capability belongs to everyone. They didn't want my house. They wanted permission to keep treating me like a resource without having to call it what it was. I didn't give them that. Not because I was hard, or cold, or unable to extend grace. But because Trevor, who was generous and warm, and who would have been the first to call out his family on their worst impulses if he'd had more time, had also been the first person in my life to say, very plainly, "You're allowed to take up space, you know." He said it once during an argument about something small, and I have thought about it almost every day since he died. I took up space. I kept my house as long as it served me, and when it stopped serving me, I sold it on my own terms. I protected what I built. I let myself grieve without letting grief make me small. And somewhere in all of that, the cease and desist, the county recorder's office, the diner with my aunt-in-law, the apartment with the big windows, I found out that I was capable of something I had always hoped I was. I could be kind and I could hold the line at the same time. They are not opposites. I just had to learn which one to lead with and when. The new place is quiet. I have a bookshelf I've been filling slowly. I make real coffee in the mornings now. I sit by the window sometimes, and I talk to Trevor in my head, the way you do when someone's been gone long enough that they've moved from loss into a kind of companionship. I think he would have been proud. Not of the fight. He would have been sad about the fight. But of the outcome. Of the version of me that came out the other side still upright, still clear-eyed, still mine. That's the part I'm holding on to. I've thought a lot about the timing of things, not in a fate-driven way, not in a everything happens for a reason way, because I don't think life is arranged that neatly. But I do think that what people choose to do when they believe no one is watching or when they believe someone is too broken to notice says everything about who they actually are. My father-in-law made that bank call at 6:47 in the morning. Trevor had been gone for 14 months. He chose that moment because he calculated that I was still soft enough, still raw enough, still grateful enough for their presence that I wouldn't push back. That calculation was the seed of everything that followed. Not my anger. Not my legal filings. His assumption. That's the part I keep coming back to. I didn't create the conflict. I just refused to absorb it silently, which is a different thing entirely. Though it can look the same from the outside when you're the one being held accountable for the first time. What I know now is that there are two kinds of strength people tend to confuse. There's the kind that looks like endurance. Staying quiet, keeping the peace, being the one who handles it so everyone else doesn't have to. I was good at that kind for a long time. And then there's the kind that looks like disruption from the outside but feels, on the inside, like finally standing still. That's the kind I had to find. The guest agreement I had them sign wasn't a trap. It was just documentation of a reality they already knew but hoped I'd forget. I didn't forget. I just waited until I had the bandwidth to act on what I knew. I think about my mother-in-law's card. The watercolor bird. The careful words. She is not a villain. She is a woman who spent decades loving her son and then lost him, and the grief of that is real and I don't diminish it. But grief, even genuine grief, doesn't give anyone the right to take what isn't theirs. Understanding that distinction, holding both things at once, the compassion and the boundary, was the hardest part of this whole year. It was also the most important. There's a version of this story where I signed nothing, said nothing. Let the fog of loss carry me along until I looked up one day and had nothing left that was mine. I almost lived that version. I was close. What stopped me wasn't toughness. It was the memory of Trevor saying, very plainly, that I was allowed to take up space. He meant it about something small at the time. He could not have known how large that sentence would grow. I am 32 years old. I live alone in an apartment with big windows and a bookshelf. I'm still filling. I drink real coffee in the mornings. I sleep through the night. I did not get here by being hard. I got here by being honest, with myself first, and then, when I had to be, with the people who were counting on me to stay confused. That, more than anything, is what I'd want someone else to carry away from this. Not the legal strategy, not the cease and desist, not the timestamps. Just the simple, difficult truth that knowing what belongs to you, your home, your time, your grief, your future, and refusing to hand it over is not selfishness. It is the most basic form of self-respect. And it is something you have to choose, sometimes over and over, even when the people asking you to give it up are people you love.